That was good. My name is Ed Howie, and this is How We Grow a Brand. 1, 2, 3. If you like what you learned from this video, help us promote this channel by clicking the like button below or subscribing to our channel. Ready to go? Let's get into today's chat. Woo! Here we go. As we look at this whole situation we're facing at retail, food service as well, but let's focus on retail to start. What the heck is going on? Why is there not enough meat on the shelves in a lot of the country right now?
Yeah. So, well, I think it's a little bit of a perfect storm, right? You know, as you know, Ed, I used to work in a meatpacking plant. And so I very much understand kind of how they work and some of the challenges that we have, not just with meat packing, but with food manufacturing and manufacturing facilities. And I think a lot of what we're experiencing is that these food manufacturing in general is an industry that works off of, you know, tremendous size and efficiency, right? So whenever you've gone into a large manufacturing facility, right, it's, you know, and there's not a lot of robotics that are happening in meat packing plants in particular. In other industries, there's more robotic innovation. So you have a lot of people, they're in relatively close quarters. So they're standing close to each other. And the processing facilities have been designed for efficient throughput. Right. And so it actually is quite difficult to kind of retrofit for a circumstance like we've had with a novel virus like we've had this year. So yeah, it's a challenge.
So not only is a manufacturing process inherently built on maximization of human power, of space, of efficiency of time, yep, thankfully there are all these food safety protocols that are in place, the whole safe handling procedures. You know, that's one of the things that's interesting about all this out there about washing your hands and covering your mouth when you cough. I mean, that's like what we learn 101, like in food safety, right?
Oh, sure.
But
yeah,
aside from the process, what has happened with the ability for manufacturers, brands to predict what the customers are going to buy? I mean, most shelves are stocked based on historical data, right? And there's no historical data to model what's going on right now, right?
That is true. I have found it really interesting when I go to the grocery store. When I go in, I always hit a couple of aisles just to see how manufacturers are doing. And what I think has been really interesting to see is, in particular, the pivot around two key categories. One would be cleaning supplies, and then the other would be any sort of disposable paper goods. So I don't care if it's bathroom tissue or if it's paper towels and cleaning wipes. What I've noticed is some concentration around the brands that people buy the most. And so I think that's been a really innovative pivot where I think both retailers and manufacturers are saying, listen, these are the brands that move the most. Normally we like to stretch out and we like to have some variety.
Variety, right.
We need to triple down on this type of product so that people have access. It has been a fascinating study in supply chain. And if you go back to the meat example real quickly, if you think about that supply chain is one that's built around people that are working in cold, damp environments. So, I mean, you know, boy, you talk about a perfect storm, right? And frankly, some of them are in very, very rural communities. So it's a tight-knit rural community. And then one worker gets sick, and then pretty soon several workers are sick. Any manufacturing facility is going to have to deal with worker safety in that regard. But packing plants are cold and wet, right, which makes it tougher when you have a virus going around.
So I was visiting with actually one of our B2I teammates, and her husband is in manufacturing, hard goods manufacturing. And he said for several weeks they were struggling with getting enough parts to be able to build what they build. But then as they have someone who has been exposed to someone with COVID, and you basically isolate the 15 people that person's near, they now have the parts. They just don't have all the people. And so
Right.
that's a reality. You know, what I found scary but also intriguing was the mentality that customers went into across the country when sheltering in place started going into reality. You know, back March, April, depending on where you were in the country.
Yep.
What were some of the more surprising things you noticed as far as consumer buying behavior that kind of like caught you by surprise or was intriguing?
Well, I think it is literally like a joke when you think about this buying behavior, but I literally never understood for a respiratory disease why people scrambled for toilet paper. I couldn't figure that one out.
And they're still scrambling for toilet paper. Unless, I mean, honestly, unless you're an H.E.B customer, our daughter lives in Atlanta and we're UPSing some toilet paper because she's not been able to find toilet paper in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it is a real thing. And, I grew up in a hurricane community. We have hurricane preparedness, even in as far inland as San Antonio, because we're not that far from the coast here. If there's a direct hit with a hurricane. But what I noticed in the short term was very similar buying patterns, what you see consumers do with hurricane preparedness.
Interesting.
The problem is normally that is in only coastal communities.
And 2 or 3 days, right?
Right. And this happened all over the country. And honestly, you could argue that some of these are global brands. They were being affected probably all over the world. So, people, when you're hit with something that is an unknown and it's unknowable, people do automatically turn towards kind of a hunker down, whether it's based on fear or caution or fear of the unknown, which is a different type of fear. We saw a lot of that really starting February, March, and it hasn't really let up in some aisles.
No, it hasn't. So in the protein category, depending on the retailer, some have been able to adjust or modify. Was there anything in protein that was either purchased or wasn't being purchased that was intriguing based on what you're seeing from your lens as well as from some of the brands you support?
Yeah. So basically what happened was very similar to other categories across the store. You can always kind of draw a similarity if you're familiar with store categories, because you can look at when somebody starts to shop, what I look at it is as if they're shopping lower on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when you're more concerned with food, shelter, and clothing, you're less concerned with the products that will bring you self-actualization. Right. So what happened is people started buying the heck out of ground beef. And there's a lot of factors that have to do with that, but it's, how to cook it, how to store it, and your family's going to like it. And you can do a ton of different things with it. So you saw a huge increase and need for ground beef. But you saw other products more like some of the deli items or maybe some of the frozen food items that were perhaps a bit further out there, a bit more exotic, and consumers made the decision that they either weren't willing to spend the money on it in uncertain financial times, or perhaps it wasn't pleasing enough to the entire family.
Interesting. So really having to have things that are more utilitarian, if you will, more functional.
Yep. Much more functional.
And we've talked before about animal utilization.
Yeah.
But the challenge is you can only get so much meat out of one animal, right? And so when the cuts and the logic of the utilization of the animal shifts so rapidly, it's very difficult to turn on a dime and get more of one cut or one grind out versus the other, right?
It is unbelievably difficult. Food service except for ground beef, right? Which ground beef is a ubiquitous product. We sell a lot of ground beef in retail and a ton of ground beef in food service, as you know, through burger chains. So, but other than that, retail tends to take a certain type of cut. And really, they run towards more of a value-oriented mix. And then food service is where you get, all of the really high-end steaks. And I'm exaggerating when I say all, but the majority of the high-end steaks are going to go towards food service. So all of a sudden, when restaurants closed overnight, there was a huge push trying to, divert that product because it's perishable. It had to be diverted quickly because ultimately what you want is you want to eliminate food waste for lots of reasons, but I think especially when you're thinking about animal protein, I really think that it's incumbent that you do the best you can to minimize food waste.
Right.
Because, it was a live animal. So you're really making those conscious decisions. But I was proud in particular of the USDA with how quickly they were able to pivot on some labeling regulations, which was fascinating.
Right.
But they saw it and they did it. So it was a case study, Ed, just a case study in how to pivot.
Which is great. I'm kind of ready for the next chapter. How about you?
I am too.
Let's turn the page.
I'd like to pivot again.
Let's pivot again. That's right. Yeah, this whole notion of this is our new normal. I'm like, no. This is our present moment. We're going to get to the new normal later, but this is not our new normal.
I agree.
Hopefully so.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Ed.
So that's it for today. If any of this works in your business this week, I'd love to hear about it in the comments or just message me. I'm Ed Howie, and you've been listening to How We Grow a Brand. Hope we've inspired some joy in you, and you'll inspire some joy in others. See you soon.